Finally, I started thinking, I think it's maybe better to just tell a prison story. In the original versions, Dan had to get West out of prison and make a deal with him so that he could help a politician that was the prosecutor who made the deal with him. And she's now up for election, and there's a very embarrassing killing that's going to ruin her personal life. And so she brings Dan in. He's got to help her forensically find out who's blackmailing her, who's this serial killer is, this really bad guy. And to do it, he's going to try to bring back the body to tell who did it. But he's been running out. He's become a famous surgeon, transplant surgeon, because he's been using diluted reanimating fluid in with this heart transplant. He has a magnificent record of success, but he's a completely corrupt person. He's a drunk because he turned against his buddy, and he's just this completely unethical person who's very successful but is miserable, and he can't make any more of the serum. The notes just don't quite work. So then he needs to get West out to redo the serum so that they can bring back the victim, and the victim can take them to the killer. So that was the original idea. And but then it started seeming like, well, maybe the prison's the good part, and maybe don't bring Dan back, because you just end up with these two middle-aged doctors. It starts being like Robin and Marion. You hate to see Robin Hood when he's an old guy. So you need to kind of skew it more towards the ages of the original movies. So I thought, well, you need a new Dan Kane. There's not really room to have two people like him in the movie. You need a new girl. And so then I just eventually thought, well, I'll just do the whole thing in a prison. It becomes a prison movie. And of course, a prison movie is always about one thing, getting out or not. So that became the whole genesis of the Beyond Re-Animator movie, that story. It was really challenging on Beyond Re-Animator because we did it in Spain. We shot it in a prison in Valencia. The whole crew was Spanish. You can hardly get effects in Spain, even though, of course, that one company that won the Academy Award was there, and they worked on Dagon. But they are real expensive in Spain. They think the effect. There's not many people doing it. They're not at the cutting edge. It's very, very difficult. And so then you're dealing with people who don't really understand Re-Animator, many who have never seen it anyway. It's not like there's a lot of support. And so it was kind of really interesting because it was Jeff and me. And we were the ones that were holding the flame. We knew the flame of what Re-Animator was, and nobody else did. So I think we were both very, very nervous. I'm sure Jeffrey was really, really nervous, and I certainly was. It was wow, because you hate to let down the franchise and the fans. And for me, it's like with Return of the Living Dead 3, that was a sequel to a really great movie, Return of the Living Dead, which is one of the 3.5 really key movies of the early 80s for me that defined a kind of genre. It was Evil Dead, Re-Animator, Return of the Living Dead by Dan O'Bannon, and I would say I would have to throw in Nightmare on Elm Street, although I kind of make it a half one because it's a bit more mainstream in a certain way. But I think the tone of Nightmare on Elm Street in the first half of that movie was really crazed and wild in the way that Evil Dead and Re-Animator and Return of the Living Dead were. So I think those movies you can put together and say are kind of the genesis of a whole kind of subgenre. people call it tongue-in-cheek, but it's not really tongue-in-cheek. It's not, when it's wisecracking, when there's sayings that, when the hero, the villain, says something funny when he kills or something. I know, yeah, Freddy did that a bit, but you can call it tongue-in-cheek, but especially with, Re-Animator and Evil Dead, it's funny, it's really comedic, but it's pure horror. I mean, it's horror for horror. When you see the first Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy is scary, The killings are really, I call them fun, but I mean, they're real rides. Evil Dead is hugely entertaining and really scary in parts, and real horror, and really makes you laugh. Return of the Living Dead is the first movie that ever really represented EC Comics and Mad Magazine in the movies. They tried to do EC Comics with Creepshow, and all through the 70s, every now and again, somebody would try to do comics. Only Dan O'Bannon did it. After he showed how to do it, oh yeah, they could do Tales from the Crypt, but they were basically copying Return of the Living Dead. So these are big, important movies in my book. When I got the opportunity to do Return of the Living Dead 3, I didn't want to separate from it, and I really also wanted to fit in with Dawn of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead. So I was real worried about the mythology once again and had a whole scheme for it, but I didn't make it funny like Return of the Living Dead. I didn't feel the need to carry on the way Ken Wiederhorn got that need to even use the same actors in Return of the Living Dead 2. They really tried to keep the same kind of energy and flow of the first movie. When I did 3, I was doing Bride of Re-Animator, except having the bride be the whole character. And I didn't make it, it wasn't overtly funny. I find it hilarious, some of the movie, but it doesn't have the same tone. But with Re-Animator, I feel differently. It's like, I can't veer. If I had made Return of the Living Dead, I probably would have made Return of the Living Dead 3 just like that one. I would have carried it on directly. And I think that it depends on what you're close to. And so with Re-Animator, I feel it's difficult for me to break too much from the past. And with Beyond Re-Animator, I just felt like, we were out there in Spain, and there's, with Spanish actors, and just Jeff and me, and trying to hope that developing this script, just trying to reach for the tone of Re-Animator to carry through the characters. And, I don't know, in Spain, some of the critics said it still maintained that what in Spanish they call la caspa español, which means when they have a movie that has can't get rid of that Spanish feel, they call it a dandruff. And so I think maybe all the Fantastic Factory movies have a little of that. Maybe Dagon less, But certainly certainly I would have to say that Beyond Re-Animator would have been a bit different with shot in the States. The same story, but to make it and to try to fit the style, the other movies was a nervous challenge.
13 years. There's bound to be some deterioration.
The Beyond Re-Animator did mostly, I think it was the vast majority of the territories put it out on DVD. In Spain, of course, we did theatrical releases for all the Fantastic Factory. Some places they did theatrical releases. But I would say to most of the major territories it went to video. And that's mostly, that's a sign of the times. When it came out, if it had come out in the late 80s, of course it would have gone theatrical. But everything's been changing over the last 10, 15 years. And in the 80s, theaters were open. They weren't monopolized the way they are now. And also movies were being financed independently off of pre-sales. And none of that's going on anymore. And over the 80s, it changed. Everything became more monopolistic. And then there's the rise of video, DVD kind of saved the video market for a while. And people started making movies direct for video. That's where the financing was. It costs more money to release a movie, to promote a movie theatrically, than they paid for the movie itself, than the budget of the movie. So if you make, back when you would make a movie for, $1.5 million or $2 million and put it in a movie theater, well, today it costs $5 million just to advertise it in the movie. Well, that's a problem. Now and you're up against the huge movies. You're up against big movies, and somebody goes to the Cineplex. Should they see, a $100 million movie or that $2 million movie? There was a time when it didn't matter because movies weren't released so wide, they weren't so promoted, it was more word of mouth, there was lots of independent cinemas. It's a different world then, it's not now. And then the internet's changed everything because people download and there's lots of competition for what to do with your time, to play video games, to go to Facebook or YouTube, or you can do so much. And so the economics has changed, and the way the movies are made based on the economic environment that they're in. And it was different in the 80s than it is now. And I think this is, it gives it determines the kinds of movies that we will see. So no, the Beyond Re-Animator at that time in the early 2000s was very difficult for a low-budget movie that wasn't a Sundance, it wasn't like what they call an indie film, to have a theatrical release. And so they mostly went to cable and video. Like I said, in Spain, of course, it got a big theatrical. In a lot of Asian countries, it gets theatrical, but certainly Germany, France, UK, it's very difficult that you see a small budget movie getting a theatrical release. Yep, Re-Animator never was a box office success, not even the first one. It didn't, in the US, it did I think it took in $1 million at the box office. Of course, I let Empire release it, and they were just beginning theatrical, and they didn't really do much with it. But none of the movies did big theatrical business like some of the other franchises, like Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, these movies did huge numbers. Saw, Scream, Friday the 13th. So they don't have a theatrical history. So to do a sequel to Re-Animator, you're looking for financing, and what companies look at is, okay, they just want to see the numbers. So when they see the numbers, they see that it doesn't support a sequel that didn't go theatrically. It's very difficult then to do another one that goes theatrical. Normally it's half-lives down. And so that hurts the financing. And if I bring Stewart and Jeffrey and Bruce Abbott together into Re-Animator, which there's costs for the rights, and if I'm coming in, well, everybody wants some money. It's not like the first one where everybody's basically working for nothing. It's, hey, this is a successful thing, I want to be paid. Now if I go to Stewart or Jeffrey and I say, let's do this, here I've got this movie to do, well, they'll be quite flexible about their compensation because they want to work, and we look at it like any project. But if I come and I say, well, you do Re-Animator, they want the payday. They help make that, as they should. Well, that means that already the budget is way higher than any other movie like that. It's easier for me to do Dagon, in which if Jeffrey was in Dagon, he would do it cheaper. Stewart worked. Everybody will do it based on the budget of the movie, because we like making movies. So we do what we can. Of course, if the budget's bigger, we'll all take more money. But if there's not much budget, then you don't. But if it's Re-Animator, that's different. So when I did Beyond Re-Animator, you've got to think, I was locked in by the Spanish system there. We were working with subsidies. In all the Fantastic Factory, I was the only foreigner, you know. I was the only guy that wasn't Spanish in that whole project. And so it was difficult when you bring people in. And to do Beyond Re-Animator, there's no way that I could afford. I had to base it on Jeffrey. He was the key. When I looked at everything, I thought, well, the essential element is Jeffrey. Re-Animator books, if people read the stories, that's not the Herbert West in the stories. That kind of ironic, crazed guy that Jeffrey played, based on the character written in the script, not in the stories. So when you look at the Re-Animator movies, that's really not Lovecraft's character. That's a character that was, according to Stewart, the writer who was most responsible for the West character was William Norris. And so he gave it that edge, that kind of funny, crazy, horrible edge. And then Jeffrey Combs took it and ran with it, and Stewart let him. Not only let him, but helped him. So I think that's the West we know. Now, any Re-Animator that I was involved in that was coming out of these movies, that's sort of maybe what we know the best about the movie, is that edge. But you can see that even people who have nothing to do with the movie, like this comic book of Re-Animator versus Evil Dead, they use the West character, but they pretend that they're basing it on the public domain Re-Animator stories. Of course, that's all nonsense, because that character doesn't exist. But that's, I think, what people know about Re-Animator, and that's what we expect to see.
You wanted me?
Yes. Here.
The work assignment.
It's not so easy to finance, even though to the fans they think, yeah, they're making, you know, remaking every minor horror movie from the 80s. Why don't they do it with Re-Animator? Or they made 7 Howlings. Why don't they make it with Re-Animator? Well, I think the simple answer is that most every other franchise is owned by a company, but Re-Animator is my thing. And just like Phantasm is Don Coscarelli. So you see those two franchises are kind of similar. He's made a few more, but you can see that they're kind of similar in the sense that they kind of stuck close to the beginning, the origins, and they never just became taken by a company and reinvented the way Halloween or Texas Chainsaw or some of these other movies have been. And I think that has to do with you know, if Don was willing to sell Phantasm, the label, to Universal or to Lionsgate, maybe they would take it and then make a ton of Phantasm movies. But he doesn't want to do it. And I think the same thing goes for Re-Animator. I always want to make more Re-Animator movies, but I never could. I don't want them to be like some of the serialized movies become. It's too dear to my heart, you know. So that's how, you know, that's why it's so difficult to get another one out. Back in the 90s, before, you know, Jason versus Freddy and all these things, I had gone to Don Coscarelli and proposed to him that we join in and make a Phantasm versus Re-Animator, be the first cross-horror franchise movie. And, you know, I could just imagine the poster of Herbert West and the ball, and the Dark Man. I mean, it would have been great. I would have loved to see that movie. But I understand. Don didn't want to do it. And I said, I told Don to direct it, and let's just join in. But I understand because that's his franchise. Phantasm is his. He wrote and directed all of them. And I just think it's really difficult for him to think about letting it get compromised in any way, even that way. And I think, so I understand it. I think I have the same problem with Re-Animator doing sequels. I'm not willing to give it up, to sell it, sell the right to somebody to make a sequel, because I'm afraid they won't do it good enough, or they won't do it, I don't know, some weird way that I think it should be done. It's kind of foolish, because I could certainly use the money, but I just don't see it. At least the ones I did, there was never anybody saying what I could do or not. So however it took to get them made, even the Spanish and the Fantastic Factory, I developed all those 10 movies in the Fantastic Factory. I came up with the idea for it. I wanted to do a label like Hammer, and this was my chance. And I really wanted to make this work, and to do Re-Animator, Beyond Re-Animator, it meant, I was limited by the way it's financed. It has to be done using, it's all Spanish. It's, we had our limitations. But on the other hand, nobody was like editing the project, or, I just had to deal with production. And I pretty much did what I thought I could, and what I could come up with. I think, you can tell that, I think the equivalent of the high-end eye creature in Beyond is the little fight at the end and the end credits, which for me, it's kind of like, I just think it's delightful, to see that little shadow of the penis and the rat fighting. And I go, I love doing scenes where I just know that there's some filmmaker somewhere going, how the hell they let him do that? And I think, wow, just to get a chance, you say, yeah, I'm gonna bring the penis to life and have it fight a rat on screen in a movie that people will see, and you think, wow, that's kind of fun, and that's, that's, of course, it's a bit wild for Re-Animator. It's different from the first one, but for me, it all kind of follows the same. I think they all kind of fit together, and I think mainly the fans were okay. I think the reaction that we got from Beyond Re-Animator was generally good, and I think it was a huge relief for Jeffrey. I know it was a relief for myself. I was so nervous that it wouldn't be good enough, and the fact that the Re-Animator fans pretty much said it was okay. Wow, that was good, because you hate to disappoint the fans. Now I'm sure a lot of people would have liked it to have been a lot better, but at least it wasn't a real disaster.